What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another week here on the Finding Direction podcast. And this week, I'm bringing a guest to you, a powerful one, and her name is Linnita Hosten. And a little bit about Linnita: she is a speaker, she's an author, and she is a student success strategist. And once you begin to honestly even hear her voice, you will notice that she is someone who just has an unbelievable caring and loving heart and personality. And on this episode, a few of the things that we talk about is we talk about why you should start to treat your life like a piece of pizza. And we'll get more into what we mean about that. But even as you start to think about that, I think just about everybody likes pizza. So we're going to talk about how pizza in your life actually have many things to do with each other. And we also talk about how do you build a strategic exit strategy if you're not currently doing what you really want to be doing? And finally, one of the other things we talk about is how do you begin to use your natural gifts to do something that you love and make a living from it? All right, we're going to dive into that and so much more in this episode. We are going to dive right in this week. If you have not yet, please leave us a rating, a review, share it with a friend. And without further ado, here we go. All right, Linnita Hosten, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I just want to comment for anybody that's watching this on YouTube or even listening to this that can't see your background. Linnita has the most awesome background. It's very folly. You crushed it on that. So I just want to throw that in there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And so, as we kick this thing off, I would love it if you could give our listeners an idea of what did life look like for little Linnita? What was your life like growing up?
Oh my goodness. First, I'm from Maryland. I live in Prince George's County, Maryland. I grew up the only child until my sister came when I was 10. I was the first in my family to go off to college and to finish. Nice. I dreamed of being a journalist. That was the goal. I was supposed to be on television. I got a little discouraged when I got to my undergraduate studies, and my speech was not as clear or as articulate as it is today. You probably would assume. It was not. This has come with a lot of practice. And so I had to find my way. But going off to college, I have always been told by all of my childhood friends, I've always been the go-getter, the goal-oriented person, the person who's doing the right thing per se, the one who's their parents want you to hang out with. I was that kid.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. And so, kind of as you, let's say, went into college, was that you're like, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to be a journalist. Was that kind of the vision for what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah. At 16, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I was telling everyone, all of my teachers. I had taken the green light was I had taken a journalism class. It was called newspaper. We actually produced a physical newspaper from start to finish. We fetched the stories, we edited, we did the layout. It was printed on newspaper paper in high school. And so that was the first itch that I got. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And the more I learned about journalists, I discovered that they also speak well in addition to writing very well. And so I was privileged to have a television productions studio at my high school where we actually had a physical morning show. We had news cameras, we had a green room, we had all of the equipment that you would have. And so I joined that class. There were 3 of them. At the second stage, you actually produced the morning show. And I was the morning show producer. So I was the one giving cues to the floor director, audio engineers, the camera persons with a little headset. I was literally being a journalist.
That's so cool.
And I loved it. I had a chance to intern my senior year of high school. I convinced my mom to get me a half day. And I went to a newsroom. At 16, I got to see, touch, rub elbows with journalists. And when I experienced it, I actually realized that it wasn't what I dreamed of. It was the exact opposite. It was high paced. It was, you had to be error free. You had to get to the point very quickly. It was a sense of urgency all the time. And I didn't like that. But I had already declared my major, had already been bragging about this dream that I had.
Right.
So I just kept the major and I went to undergrad anyway. But in the back of my mind while I was studying, I'm like, this isn't it. I need to find how else can this connect?
Right. What did you what did you expect it to be? Like, what did you think journalism was going to be all about?
No one has ever asked me that question, but it's so good. I expected glitz and glam. I expected like to be like, okay, all right, we're gonna count you down. Are you ready? It's not like that. You have a story. We got 3 minutes till showtime. I don't care. Make it up. We're in 5, 4. Fix your mic too. And it's just very aggressive. And it's because things are always happening. So you are required to think fast, on your feet, to problem solve. I don't know if you all know this, but a news anchor has an earpiece. Someone is talking to them the entire time as they're talking. So it's a lot of multitasking. Yeah, they're saying, cut it short. You're coming to an end. Too long. Cut and take. You need to get at the same time while you're talking.
What?
So it's a lot.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Totally. And I think like what a blessing, but an intentional blessing on your sense that one, you were like driven and ambitious enough to be like, as a senior in high school, I want to go do this thing. I want to try it. I want to experience it. And the blessing of like realizing at that point, since you got to try it, that it wasn't really the thing. Because I think sometimes what happens is, we have this idea, and I share this with people all the time, but it's like we have this idea of what something's going to be like, but then once we taste it, oftentimes it's so different than the thing we actually thought it was going to be. It's like you could stare all day at a piece of food and be like, oh, that I don't like that food, but it's like, well, have you actually tried it and seen if your taste buds like that? And sometimes we kind of do this in our life, is we go, oh, I always wanted to be this thing, because we have this picture in our mind of what it's going to be, but we've never actually tried it. And I think, such a blessing. So I guess for you, like, what would you say is the importance of people actually doing the things that they think they might want to do with their life, rather than just like philosophizing about it?
You're speaking my language. It's called a fantasy. When you've never touched, experienced, or seen something, but you desire it so strongly, that's a fantasy. It's not until you have touched it, seen it with your own eyes, felt it with your hands, experienced it physically, that you can actually develop a very personal connection to it that surpasses any fantasy that you can have. And I think it's very important. It's one of the things that I encourage parents to do as they are raising their children, and educators as well, is they're instrumental in helping children devise a career path. I think it's important that we expose them. I say that all the time. We can only dream based off of what we have seen repeatedly. So the more things we see, touch, and feel and experience, not only do they make our dreams more real, but there's a stronger connection that you have to it. So yeah, I think it's very important. Yeah. Yeah.
So real. Yeah. It's interesting. I have a buddy, his name's JQ as short. His full name's a little more difficult to say. But JQ, I think he's in his late 20s, early 30s, and he just got an internship doing something that he's always been curious about. And I'm like, what a cool idea that even when you're like, sometimes we think of like an internship, it's like, well, yeah, maybe when you're in college or something, you go try it. But he's like, no, like, I want to try this thing, so I'm going to go do a free internship and try it, see if I like it. And it's like, what a cool, way to approach things.
That's awesome. And it definitely shows how passionate he is about something, that even at that age, he'd be willing to lend his personal time without, the expectation of compensation based off of his experience. I love it.
Yeah. Love it. So let's go then forward in your story. So, eventually you figure out journalism is not the way, and you're trying to slowly escape the wrath of journalism. How did you kind of navigate that process as you're like, I've told the world this is the thing I'm going to do, but this isn't what I want to do?
Well, there was a down period. Right after I graduated, I came home and I sat on my mom's couch for 6 months. And I don't know about you, Stu, but I love to make money. I was the kid selling candy out my backpack. And not because my parents didn't have money to give me. I just like having my own money. So I sold all kinds of things. And I worked at Starbucks, and I don't know if you know this, but they throw away the pastries every 2 days. So instead of throwing them away, I packed them up in my backpack against store policy, and I'd sell them at school. So sorry, Starbucks, that was a long time ago. Can't come get me now. But Yeah, so to be home after investing $50,000 in my undergraduate degree, it was painful. It was a stroke to my ego. It made me, I had like a sense of buyer's remorse. Like, did I make the right decision? Did I study the right thing?
Yeah.
And I had to force myself to go up to the library in my neighborhood, and I started studying like what it meant to interview, how you fill out a job application, like strategically, what you should put on your resume, what kinds of experiences should you be highlighting, and like grooming. Like I studied that for a whole week.
Yeah.
Remember, I told you I was one of a kind. Because I was at this point, I'm like 21, which is rare that someone would do that. And I think about that now. I'm like, wow, you were really advanced. And so they had this job center in my neighborhood. I was just driving by, and I went in, and they said, you know, we do resume reviews. If you're having a hard time finding a role, we'll take a look at what you have and assess how you could make it better. So I was learning. And I went back to the drawing board, and I started getting offers. I got 3 offers, actually. And I ended up negotiating my first salary. All of them were in the realm of communications. They were all in the realm of education or training and development. And so while it was not a journalist, I was still using the skills of writing, speaking, presentation, and training facilitation was in every role. And so at 22, by this point, I was 22, I ended up negotiating my first salary. And so that was my entry point into communications as a profession. Yeah.
Love it. So I think, you know, just in hearing that from you, it's like, what a incredibly resourceful person that you were. You know, it's like, okay, I got to go out there and search and find these things. It's like the tools are there in the world, but if you're not resourceful enough to find them, you know what I mean? It's not going to do anything good in your life. So just kudos to you on being so resourceful. And, you know, as you went into this chapter that I know, you know, specifically from doing some research, you eventually had like 4 different job opportunities. And I'm curious for you, how did you kind of narrow that down to picking the one? And then for other people, as they face moments of life where they go, okay, you know, I got these 2-3 different things I want to do. Like, what tips would you give to them on, like, how do you narrow it down to the one?
Oh my goodness. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think, what did I do? At this point, that was like 11 years ago. It wasn't based on, you know what? This was the kicker. The place that I decided to go to, I knew I could get my master's for free. And that's where I went. It was the system. It was the school system for all of the public colleges in the state of Maryland. It's called the University System of Maryland. And so obviously I can go to any of the system schools, which include University of Maryland College Park, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I could go to any of them if I wanted to get any level of any kind of academic degree. So that is what led my decision there. But I will say also in that particular role, it was very unique. It was new. I was basically creating an outreach position, doing college preparation and awareness for 6th graders and their parents. And it had never been done before. So they literally just had data and, you know, statistics. And they said, okay, can you create a training program around this for parents, educators, and a great keynote for kids? And we'd like to send you out. Can you create like giveaways? Like, we have this budget, posters, backpacks, you design them or find a designer. We need a website. Like, that sounded very fun for a 22-year-old.
Right.
And so I ended up taking that role. So it was based on the benefits and then what I'd actually be doing.
Yeah. And so what advice would you give, you know, other people that are like trying to navigate, okay, I got a few different options of things I could do. What advice would you give them on, like, how do you narrow that down to picking the right one?
Yeah, I'm really big on getting clear about what your end goal is. Every decision, every decisive measure that you make should be based on the end goal. I didn't have an end goal then, but some students do, or some young professionals do. So based on your end goal, every decision that you make should align with that. So if the end is for you to, you know, that you want to receive a doctorate so that you can teach at the higher ed or collegiate level, then the places that you go or that you're considering for employment, it'd be great. It's not a deal breaker, but it'd be great if they provided some type of tuition reimbursement. Also, if you know you want a diverse set of skills, you want to be able to work in interdepartmentally, meaning you're not in a rigid role where you only do this. I think that's important too. And then based off of like how you learn and what environments you enjoy being in, I do think that that is a factor as well. So I like to work independently and I learn by doing. So meaning I have to learn in a group setting or by way of being taught, but give it to me and then I want to do it alone. So assessing how you learn and then your ideal work environment, I think are great factors to consider as well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, one of the things that I was taught kind of in the beginning of like my professional life, I guess you would say, is like almost looking at everything you do as like a step. And like you said, if you know where the end goal is, it's like, okay, well, if I have two options, is one step going to help me get close? Is like, you know what I mean? And it's understanding that you may not go from the first step to the fifth step, but the first step can open an opportunity or a door to get you to the second step. And then the second step can teach you a tool and a skill that gets you to the third step. It's almost like a video game in a sense. Like you're learning the things to get to the next level to ultimately get to, the goal.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Very much so.
Yeah. So another question I would have kind of in a different sense is, obviously there's the moment where some people face where it's like, okay, I got a few options. And then there's the other event that can happen, which I'm going to call for simple sakes, like your rebrand, because I know, somewhat recently you had some of a rebrand that you've done yourself. And so in this sense, the rebrand I'm talking about is like, okay, you're doing something and you started to realize like, it's like, I'm not really liking this. You know what I mean? Like I'm here and it provides financial support. But like inside of my heart, I know this is not what I'm supposed to do. Like what advice would you give people on how they can kind of make that transition or rebrand to stepping out of this thing that they're kind of realizing they don't really enjoy?
Oh my goodness, it's so good. That is such a great question. I've experienced this. I feel like money is like an anchor, and we think about an anchor as being something that we rely on to keep us kind of like planted. But an anchor also holds down the weight and causes something to resist movement. And so sometimes the latter definition of an anchor is to our own detriment of our own fulfillment. It may not be to the detriment of our financial gain, but to how we feel about what we're doing and how we're trading our time for money doesn't always necessarily provide the best, rate of return, what we call those release of feel-good endorphins. And I do feel like we can have both. I'm just bold, courageous, and ambitious enough to think that you can have both.
Let's go.
So I worked in a role. When I left that role, I made very minimal money, less than 40K. I transitioned into I guess it's like quasi-private, but in the transportation sector where I worked every holiday. I worked overnight. I worked with persons who did not have a degree, but they were earning a lot of money because they were basically essential and earning nighttime differential pay. So I was bringing home about between $2,400 and $2,600 biweekly at 24 and 25 with no children, no bills, no spouse, but I was miserable. I was miserable. I was missing, this sounds so insignificant, but I was missing all of the social events because I worked at night. I was missing all the holidays because I was working and I didn't like how it felt. So I could resonate with persons who may be getting like, I'm compensated very well, no complaints about that. But I just wish there's this one piece missing that if I could just plug that. And one of the things that I started doing is I started developing an exit strategy. And I'll be honest, dude, this is difficult to do when you're in an unhappy place because that requires energy. But once I realized like, I don't want to stay here, so I have to make a change. I started requesting special projects that better align with my interests. So I convinced my department to adopt a school. I've always been passionate about kids. And so we adopted a whole school. And for the entire school year, we met 4 basic needs. We developed a pantry of clothes for parents to interview. This was very hard to do, by the way. I'm making it sound very easy, but organizing 90 people asking for money, it was a lot. We sponsored their entire graduation celebration, including what they were wearing. So that means raising money for that. I mean, it was a lot in addition to my day-to-day tasks, but it helped me get like a sense of enjoyment about going into the office. And I was like, building camaraderie. And everyone felt the way I felt. Everyone felt this sucks. This place sucks. It's toxic, but I'm paid very well. Everyone had a very nice car outside and a very nice house, but everyone was unhappy. So it felt good to bring some sense of fulfillment unrelated to the role. But what I was doing was I was building a portfolio. I was showing that I was a team player. I could take initiative. I could take something from conception to like implementation, because literally this was just an idea.
Yeah.
And I started building a portfolio. Now, again, in hindsight, I didn't know I was doing this too. So I'm making it sound magical. It's not magical. It was just like, I'm bored. Well, what about if we adopt a school?
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I was building an exit strategy. So when I started re-interviewing for new roles, and it took about 2.5 years to get out of that role. And, you know, I sit down with an interviewer, even though what I was doing did not like directly align, I was showing them like, well, this is what I could do. It had nothing to do with transportation. So I think just being creative, like how can you create a sense or reignite the flame that you have inside of you unrelated to what you're doing? How can you introduce that to where you existingly are and then creatively work on an exit strategy while doing that?
Yeah, it's a very cool way of doing it too, because it's like you're building an exit strategy while like there's two exit strategies now I'm learning. One is you do like your side hustle and you have that and you're building that. But then the other way, which you're saying, which is like such a cool way to do it, is you're like, well, what's a way that I can build something that's going to help me get to the next step, but do it with the company that I'm currently with? Because like you said, now you go to the next interview and they're like, oh, transportation, that doesn't really pertain, but you built a school? Like, okay, like their ears perk up. And that's such a, I've never heard it that way. I love that.
Yeah, I define myself as a strategist. I think strategically about how things can work. And so I attribute that skill set to that ability.
Yeah. You gotta be, I think, intentionally thinking about your life. Like that's a real aspect as you navigate through your life. It's like sometimes like, you know, there's like the midlife crisis or whatever. It's like you wake up one day and you're like, what the hell's happened to my life? And I think a lot of the times that happens because we never like intentionally said, well, what do I want my life to look like? And when you ask that question, you do got to start strategically in your head, say, okay, well, you know, I mean, it's more than just a conversation over a cup of coffee. It's like, you got to be thinking about this for sometimes weeks, months, years, you know, and then also tasting, trying, experimenting with things, and journaling. Is that your journal?
This is my journal. I have a new journal every year. In October, before the new year, I map out what is my intention for the next year in October. So before the new year happens. And so technically, I typically have already started the new year before it occurs, but very intentional. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever journaled like how you intend to do your new year. And then at the end of the year, you reflect on what you've done. Obviously, during the year, you look back and say to realign yourself, because we often stray away. But I'd say about 70% of the things that I say I want to get done, they are accomplished because I wrote them down.
Yeah. What are like 2 or 3 prompts you do when doing that? Because, you know, for everybody that's listening to this, it's right around the new year. So like what's a few prompts they could use to say like, what are my intentions for 2022? Yeah.
I put them into categories. So financial is a big one for me. I was able to retrieve my credit score from 510 back to a 718. And that took years, by the way. So I pride myself. Pride is not the best word. I'm very fascinated with maintaining it. Let's put it that way. So finance goals are big for me. Savings, investing. Where I'm giving, I'm very active at my church. I tithe. And then I also have a scholarship fund. So my goals related to finance are usually in those buckets, like how much, how frequently, what am I sacrificing so that I can do those things? And a lot of that means not eating out as much, not buying clothes, those sorts of things. So finance is a category. Relationships is one. I'm intentional about the number of persons I want to meet in business every year. So I'll categorize like meet 10 new persons in this area. And then about the persons that I want to love on throughout the year. So one of my goals is to visit my grandmother by monthly. She lives in New York. It's like a 4-hour drive. And then being intentional about spending time with my family and being present when I am there because I'm often gone. So those relationship goals, I'm not dating, but I'm taking referrals too. So if you have anybody, please look my way.
I got you.
So I have spiritual goals as well, like committing to a spiritual development class, reading a spiritual development book, or listening to one. And then business goals. And those are like the 4 categories. So I start there. I identify the categories. And then the areas that I'm, passionate about making sure that they happen under the categories, I write. Typically, I have about maybe 5 or 6 goals. Next to the goals, I write the strategy. So let's say this year, my goal is to give at least $5,000 to my church by way of tithing and general offerings. Yeah. So the strategy is obviously to set up my my tithes on auto pay, to monitor my budget, like being specific about that. So that's what I do. Yeah. I categorize, identify 5 or 6 targets, and then put the strategy next to it.
Love it. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, you have me thinking about, because as of the recording, today's November 3rd. So you got me thinking. I'm like, I got this big whiteboard in front of me. I'm like, all right, next whiteboard session, 2022. So it's going to be here any moment. So one question I would have for you as well is, one of the things you speak on as you talk to a lot of people as well is like finding your dream career. And I would be curious, like, how would you say, and I know we could probably be here for a long time talking about this, but in a nutshell, how would you say someone can really find their dream career?
Yeah, I think it starts with being very clear on who you are. Like at the core of the essence of who you are, what are you naturally, innately good at? Typically, those things help you to identify what it is that you would associate with a dream career path. It is through the things that we do naturally and well. Some of us are multifaceted, so we do a lot of things well. So for those persons, it's narrowing it down. But I'm not a person who does a lot of things well. I do very few things very well. And one of them is working with children. So first, identifying what you naturally, innately do very well without very little training. No one taught you. And it does something inside of you. There's a release of endorphins, which is a feel-good hormone, or feel-good release in your body. The same release you get from working out, having sex, laughing at a good movie, eating chocolate, or enjoying the company of your loved ones. That release you will get when you're doing something that you love. And so after you've identified what you're naturally good at, doing things that allow you to practice that skill. So you literally have to trial and error. Yeah. So I'll give you an example of this. I knew I was good at working with kids. I realized that when I was hired to work at a summer camp. At the summer camp, we had this big talent showcase at the end. And I enjoyed putting the talent showcase together. That meant editing the music, doing the choreography. Yeah. We won 1 year. We won first place. I was so surprised because it was very competitive. And that gave me the opportunity to teach cheerleading, or to be a cheerleading coach at a local high school using transferable skills. I had a chance to coach high school girls, and I was young. I was 6 years older than them. So I look like them, actually. Yeah. And those are a lot of different ways to practice working and developing relationships with young people. Right. And I had a chance to private tutor. So I had a lot of experience to test out working with children. Right. And that is how I found my path. I call it the hot zone, when your ideal industry meets your desire or passion area. Yeah. So you only do it through trial and error, but I think the root of it starts at identifying what am I really good at and that I really enjoy.
Right. Yeah. And I love it too. It's like when you know the thing that you enjoy, trying many different things to fulfill that need, because it's just like you said, working with kids, perfect example. There's a quadrillion different ways that you can do that, but you're never going to find your hot spot. You call it hot zone. Hot zone. If you don't try the different things. And I think it's, it's also taking that amount of self-discipline to say I'm going to try something. And if it doesn't align with me, I'm going to allow myself to say no, even if it pays me. And the analogy of money being an anchor, I think that's so real too. It's you have to have the discipline to say this isn't fulfilling my soul. Let me step into abundance versus scarcity and know that I can step and try something else, and that's going to lead me in the right way.
Wow. That's powerful, Stu.
Abundance. Abundance is the key. You know, I think if we can live in an abundance mindset as we go through the process of figuring out our life, it's such a staple, because so many times we get stuck in scarcity. We'll go, well, this pays the bills. Well, you know, that I'm happy like 2 days a week, or I like that one little thing about it. But the reality is that's scarcity talking. When we live in an abundant world, you can create anything you want, but you have to be willing to take the step of faith and say, I'm going to step into abundance and believe that this is going to work out. Easier said than done, you know?
It is easier said than done. And I feel like you can do it alongside of doing something that you don't. Everything that you see, I've built it while working full time. I still work full time. No one believes me when I say that. They're like, how? When do you have time? I've mastered how to manage my time. And I don't say that lightly, but I do. I think it's possible. I do. I think it's possible. And if I had not, I would have never had the time. Would have never had the time to build this. This is year 8. And this year we're very close to making 6 figures for the first time. I was in the red for 5 years.
Let's go.
The first time someone hired me was 5 years after I had already launched. So I think it's a matter of, like you said, abundance, commitment, and just being. And to be honest, it was so fulfilling. It didn't even feel like 5 years of being unpaid.
Right. Yeah, I love it. You're like a time ninja. So cool. I also work full time as well and do these things too. So I feel you in the sense of like, if you want it bad enough, if you're committed, you find the time. You know what I mean? It's like the cliche saying, if it's important, you'll make time for it. So
you will.
Heck yeah. Well, Linnita, this has been an absolute honor to just like pick your brain and have conversations. You're such a just like joyous soul that you resonate, and I really do honor and appreciate that. I'm curious, you know, if people are listening to this and they go, okay, I need some more Linnita. I need to see what she's up to, what's going on in her life. Where can people find you?
On every platform you can find me, Linnita Hosten. I have not met yet another Linnita Hosten spelled that way. So that spelling, I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram, but I go live every Thursday. I stream through Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So you're welcome to join me every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I guess that's 5 p.m. P time.
Cali time.
PT time, or Cali time. But yes, you can find me all things Linnita Hosten, and LinnitaHosten.com as well.
Awesome. And so last question I have for you, a question we ask all of our guests because we want to help people find direction, but do it through action, is what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Oh, get clear on where you'd like to go. I think it scares us to think really big. That's my dog saying, hey, let me in now. You finished with the interview?
Yeah.
But I think it scares us to think really big, like to write down, open the storefront. Like it seems unreal, unattainable, but it's the actualization of you breaking down a big goal into small chunks that will make it real. And I think that's what gets us excited and allows us to like sustain our excitement while we're pursuing something that seems like unreachable. So write it down. I'd start from the very big goal, write it down at the bottom of the page. My mentor taught me this. You'd identify really key milestones that would get you to the storefront if that's your goal. Maybe it is researching how much it costs, so I know how much I need to get down payment, or researching the vendors to get, I don't know, store supplies. Like, who are those persons? How do I get a business line of credit? Like, and then as you achieve those things, crossing them off. Something about crossing something off, it just does something to you. You're like, yes, I'm closer. But writing down the end goal, identifying the milestones, and in between each milestones, there are really small steps that you just stay committed to achieving until you get to the big thing. You just apply that very small principle with anything, even if it's a small project, it makes goal setting seem very like, okay, this is doable. While it may take time, it's doable. So that would be my advice in the next 24 to 48 hours. What's the end goal? What are the milestones for that end goal? And can you identify 5 or 6 key points that you can do in between each milestone to get you closer to the end goal?
I love that. And I love to, and if you're listening to this, not watching it on YouTube, I love how you kind of showed with your hands, you're like almost writing it out as like the way I look at it is like a math equation. And you're like, all right, I know the answer is 25. So like what's the 1 plus 3 plus 7 plus 2 plus 6 to get there? I love how you said it, like take a piece of paper at the bottom, put it, and then ask and fill in like what are the things that need yeah, I love that. So awesome. So Linnita, again, thank you so much for being here today. Massively appreciate you bringing your beautiful energy, and just thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me, Stu.
Absolutely.